Hello and welcome everybody to another of our Care Uncut live stream. So this is where we're a little bit more honest about what we think about what should happen in social care in general. And we're back again with another fantastic guest who I'm really excited to introduce to you. But before I do, I just want to go over a couple of things. Obviously, a lot of you have been watching this sort of like on playback, as people do when we edit and cut down some clips and people get really interested in the debates. But if you are watching, even if it's on, you're watching back, then remember to share, remember to like, remember to subscribe to us if you aren't already. It just helps more people see about these debates, what we're talking about. It helps with the algorithms. So whether you're on Facebook or whether you're on YouTube, then please do get involved and share what we've got to say, and comment, put all your comments, all your thoughts in the live stream chat, wherever you are watching us. And just as a reminder, if you're in Bristol and you are thinking about voting and you're thinking which of the mayoral candidates should I choose, well, we did a live stream at the weekend and we spoke to pretty much all of the candidates, and all about social care, and we put your questions to them. So please do go back on our YouTube, on our Facebook, and you can watch that again. So only for people in Bristol, but still very interesting to have a social care hustings, I thought. And next week, we have a couple of live streams. We're going to be talking about the results of our vaccine survey. So we're going to be doing a report. And one of the questions that we asked in our report was, should vaccination be made mandatory for people working in social care? And obviously that's quite political and, interesting to kind of look at people's responses to that. So that's one of the results. But of course, we haven't said who said no, and who said no, yes to that question. So we're going to reveal everything next couple of weeks. We're going to talk about it next week. So do please, if you subscribe, if you're on YouTube, click the bell, then you'll get a notification of when we go live or when we plan to go live. And of course, you can subscribe through our website or just email us and get all the information about what we're doing. And of course, last thing to do is do a quick update on is our Care Uncut takeover. So many of you will know that I'm on maternity leave. I've got an 8-week-old, so I'm not doing all of these live streams at the moment. And I've just opened up our platform to anybody in social care who wants to get involved with this and just run their own show, basically, but doesn't want the hassle of the back end stuff and the production. So you can have our access to our team. So Caroline Southgate, who also works at NICE, she has decided to host this one, and that's on the 19th of May. And I'm looking forward to sort of sitting back and watching that. So again, you just need to subscribe and of course get involved, and you can watch more of what they've got to say about their topic. So on to today. So really excited to have Nadia Whittome with us. Nadia is a Labour MP. You may have heard of her because she talks a lot about social care. And one of the fantastic things about Nadia is that she's actually walking the walk, if you like. She's been a care worker and she's been there and she's been on the front line. And I think hearing what she has to say, being a politician and having had that experience, it just feels a little bit more tangible. It feels more real because, of course, she's not just talking about it based on what third parties are telling her. She's actually been in that position before. So other wonderful, amazing facts about Nadia. She was elected at the age of 23 and is the youngest MP in Parliament today. So a really amazing achievement there. Member of Parliament for Nottingham East. That was since 2019 general election. She was born in Nottingham. And before becoming an MP, like I explained, she was a care worker. And during the first wave of COVID-19 pandemic, she returned to do that work part-time alongside being working in Parliament and her parliamentary work. And also, I'm sure I've also read about Nadia donating some of her wages as an MP to charities as well. So some really impressive statistics about Nadia there. But I'm not just going to talk about her. Let's bring Nadia into the stream. Welcome.
Hey, Sophie, it's really great to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. I've sort of seen you say and write things about social care, and it's just rung true to me on so many different levels. So I'm so excited that you accepted the ask to come and join us today. How was your bank holiday weekend?
I've been following the work that you've been doing since we spoke together on that panel at Nottingham Debonairs CLP. Constituency Labour Party, which was really great. I've had a good bank holiday. How about you?
Just busy. We've been trying to do these social care hustings for Bristol, which is my hometown, and it is really difficult, I find, to get people interested in that type of politics right now. I don't know whether it's because lockdown is opening up, when people are doing things and they actually don't want to be watching live streams at the moment or talking about voting, but it's not such a hot topic as I thought it would be, but still there grafting as much as we can.
Sounds like you're doing a good job. I think people are pretty zoomed out after a year of Zoom, so that's quite difficult. And I think even like engaging with people on the doorstep is quite hard during lockdown as well. So it's been a really difficult campaign up in Nottingham as well.
Right. And how are you with the candidates in Nottingham? Are you quite confident with the Labour candidate there? I don't know who's there at the moment.
In Nottingham, we've only got the Police and Crime Commissioner election. So we're hoping to return Paddy Tipping as Police and Crime Commissioner. It'd be an absolute disaster if we had a Tory PCC. And county elections, but none in the city.
Right, okay. It's quite confusing with all the different areas that they're all voting in different ways, but yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go straight into our first question and maybe just go over why social care is important to you, and maybe talk about your experience as being a care worker.
Yeah, so for so many reasons, as you said, before I was an MP, I was a care worker, so I've got a personal connection with social care. I really loved my job. It was very tough work, but it was also very rewarding work, being able to facilitate people living the fullest and happiest lives that they can. And it was also just a real laugh. I worked with some of the funniest, kindest women, and they were mainly women. And we really got to see tangibly the difference that we were able to make to people's lives every day. And then, as you mentioned, during the first wave of coronavirus, I returned to my previous care job, like thousands of others in health and social care who had done the same thing. And for me, that was really an act of solidarity, something practical that I could do to help my former colleagues and to relieve some of the pressure that I knew that they'd be experiencing, because we knew even right at the beginning of the pandemic that the burden of this would fall on social care. And I knew as a former care worker that that meant the burden would be falling on my colleagues and other care workers around the country. So we know, don't we, that care work has always been absolutely essential to the running of society, that you can't have a functioning society without care workers and without a good fit-for-purpose social care system. But I think COVID-19 really laid bare some of the inequalities, the massive underfunding and understaffing of social care, and also just what a critical role care workers play. Yet we also saw that it was, and has been for many, many years now, shamefully undervalued. I mean, the fact that the government considers it to be low skilled is not just wildly inaccurate, but it's extremely insulting. In fact, before COVID-19, I challenged Priti Patel in the House of Commons to explain exactly which aspects of care work she considered to be low skilled. Unsurprisingly, she wasn't able to, or she wasn't prepared to give me an answer. And that's why I think it's it's really important that with the platform that I now have as an MP, but also my experience as a care worker and the experience of my colleagues and my constituents who work in social care, that I stand up for care workers. Care workers are so often exploited and marginalised, and also for people accessing care service, because many of those people are the most vulnerable to marginalisation and exploitation as well. And I think it's important that we recognise that working conditions equals caring conditions, and good working conditions for care workers make for good conditions for people who are being cared for. And I think it's also really important that we recognise that this is an issue that intersects with a lot of other issues. It's a workers' rights issue. It's also a feminist issue and a women's rights issue and a migrants' rights issue.
Absolutely. There's so much in there to kind of unpick, if you like.
So yeah, you'll have to shut me up, because when I start talking about go on and on.
It's fine. You're here to talk, so you're in the right place. So where should we start? I'd like, first of all, before we go into sort of like the general policy and what should change, it might be interesting to hear about your own experience, because I don't know whether you can talk about it, but I remember hearing around about this time last year, when in your own employment you were trying to speak out and talk about some of the issues, but you were really shut down. Do you think there's a problem in the way that social care workers might want to speak out about their position, but because maybe we're not part of unions as much, we don't really have the voice to speak out about some of the issues that are going on in social care as you would know about the NHS?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as we know, care work is chronically neglected and underpaid, as well as being generally undervalued. And that level of insecurity and precariousness that care workers experience on a daily basis is horrendous often. Lots of care workers are employed as agency staff or on 0 hours contracts. Many are paid so little that they can't even make ends meet, particularly if you're a home care worker and then you're not paid between visits. You're not paid by the hour, you're paid per visit. So say you're paid for that 15 minutes of a care call, but it takes you 45 minutes to get to your next care call. You're not paid for that. And often care workers who work even full time and are picking up extra hours as well are still struggling to feed their families. They're still struggling to pay their bills and to pay their rent, and just to live the kind of dignified, happy and fulfilled life that everybody wants to live and has the right to live. I mean, when I returned to care work last year, it was the national shortage in PPE was well documented, and when I spoke about that, I was sacked from my role. And really, the story there is not MP loses second job, because, you know, who cares? I'm not relying on that second income to feed my family or to keep a roof over my head, and I was donating it to our local mutual aid fund anyway. What little wages I was earning in my second job as a care worker. The point is that people are treated like that in social care all the time, and they don't have the platform that I have, and they don't have the privilege that I have. So after that, I invited carers from all over the country to write to me about their experiences during that first wave of the COVID pandemic. And I, of course, I knew that the problem was widespread. I knew that this was deep rooted over many, many years. but care worker after care worker from every corner of the country, from Northern Ireland to the Northwest, to London and the South Coast, every part of the country wrote to me and described their experiences of a lack of PPE, a lack of testing, completely unsafe working environments that they faced on the front line, and just how poorly they felt treated and how undervalued they felt when they were going into care homes or retirement villages or people's homes, whatever setting they worked in, every day putting their lives at risk without adequate protection, and were still being paid poverty wages and not even being fully recognised by their employers or by the government. And honestly, we, after this year, we need a reckoning for the way that care workers and people who access social care have been treated. They have been tragically and chronically let down by the government, and we simply can't let that slide.
Absolutely. And I
think it's worth saying that it's a workforce that is disproportionately made up of people of colour, particularly women of colour and migrant women, and the fact that that means that there are a sort of wider racial and gender inequalities that also need to be addressed. But as you say, it's an under-unionised workforce, and I think that's for lots of different reasons. Like, if you're on a very low wage, paying monthly subscriptions is difficult. If you're on a 0 hours contract and so are all of your colleagues, and half the people you work with are agency staff and they're different every day, then that makes organising difficult. But GMB and Unison have been organising in the care sector for some time now. And I know that United Voices of the World Union are also now organising in the care sector. And I just wanted to talk a little bit, if we've got time, about the care workers at the Sage Care Home in North London. These are...
Well, I'll just pause you there, because I think we've got a little bit of a... No, I know, I love it. I do love it. Because there's a couple of things you mentioned which I definitely want to come back to, because I think there's something around unions. And when we had the people on for the mayoral live stream that we did last Saturday, there were a few things actually that the Green candidate talked about, and I know it wasn't the Socialist candidate talked about, and I really want to bring up a clip on that. But also, I think we would like to do a live stream with all of the unions on it, just to talk about why it's important. And your point about, thinking that's another outgoing that I have to pay in order to be part of something. I think there's a case to be built up within the sector of why unions can, how they might help not only just people who work in care, but also employers as well, because it's not necessarily that the fact that employers can't always give what they want to give. Obviously, there will be some who hold back what they could provide, but also how the government is funding local authorities to provide really good working conditions for people. But I don't know if we can bring up, we have a little bit of a banner, I think, about that strike action. I think it's this, is it this one, Nadia?
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
So yeah, carry on, explain to us what this was all about.
Yeah, so this is just incredible. I can't stress how historic this is. It really is the first time that anything like this has happened, and it's a gut-wrenching decision for care workers to make, to go on strike, because all you care about as a care worker is looking after and doing your best by your residents, and you build very personal relationships with them. So I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for these workers to say, actually, we're being treated terribly, we're being exploited, and we deserve better than this. And this is our only option. So they've been on strike for full sick pay and for £12 an hour living wage. And what this means, if they're successful, but even the very act of them going on strike and holding the line, I think this this could be the catalyst for a sea change across the sector. And if they win, that's not just going to be a win for them individually in their care homes, but it's going to be a win for care workers across the country, and also other gig economy workers and 0 hours contract workers. So yeah, I'm completely inspired by them, and I'll continue to back them to the hilt. And anyone who's watching, if you're able to donate to their strike fund, then please do.
I really appreciate you mentioning it, because I didn't know anything about this until you mentioned it in the prep chat we had. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. I suppose the only question that I have, and I often, when I talk about these things, and you're inspired by NHS workers that strike, or anybody who strikes who's in the kind of health sector, but it's just, I feel for social care, it's just so new for us, and because when you're starting off doing something like this, and it's, people talk about the sector being fragmented, and I always hate it when people say that, because I think actually we're no more fragmented than health service, where you've got GPs and pharmacists, but no, we do have a lot of differences across the sector, that even the way it's made up, and ownership and everything. So it is difficult to organize, but it is interesting to see how people are starting to do it, and it's starting to come through. So I'm going to try and share this clip, and I did post it on our Twitter, so I'm going to see if this works, because I haven't really tested it out yet. So hopefully everyone can see this. So this is a question that we asked one of the candidates. This was Tom, who is the trade union and socialist candidate, and it's not necessarily to promote him particularly, but it's just what he said in a nutshell, and I really want to hear your sort of thoughts on it, because I think it's probably a little bit similar. So let's try and share that. One is from Sheila, and she's asking, do you feel that care workers are paid enough? If not, what plans would you have to improve funding so providers can pay a fair wage? So I'm going to start off asking, shall I go back to Tom? I'm going to go back to Tom for this one, please.
Okay, no, simply workers are not paid enough. It's very undervalued. We want to see an immediate increase in the minimum wage nationally to £12 an hour, but we want to raise all workers' wages, not just in line with inflation, but actually to make up for what has been lost in a decade of austerity and pay restraint. We want to reverse privatisation, to take profit out of the equation, but also to allow a direct democratic control over the setting of pay. But crucially, we need a mass campaign to take on the government to fight for the funding for these things that we need. And I don't think the Tories can so easily claim that they don't have the money for these things now, after the billions that rightly has been spent on dealing with the pandemic, although a lot of that has ended up in the pockets of their mates, proves that, if something's a priority, the money is there.
Hopefully you heard that.
Yeah, I did.
So what did you think about some of the things he said? So the £12 an hour you mentioned already with the SAGE, the strikes, reversing privatisation, and a campaign. Is there something in sort of like a cross-party, a few parties who agree on these things to come and lobby together on some of these things, and how much do you agree with what he said?
I completely agree with that, and these are exactly the issues that I've been raising in Parliament. Care workers need to be paid at least a real living wage. We need to take privatisation out of the social care sector and have a national care service that is funded through general taxation, and that has been Labour's policy since 2010. What we need to talk about is what that national care service should look like. But I was extremely proud to campaign and to stand as a candidate and then be elected on that platform at the 2019 election. I think, we've seen all of the huge gaps that have been caused by underfunding and a lack of democracy in the social care sector. And what we need is, we need a national care service, which is really about a vision to create a social care system that meets people's needs, that minimalizes the financial uncertainty that people experience, and fundamentally just treat people with dignity, with care, and with respect. So it should be a service that, like the National Health Service, is free at the point of use. And this is, I mean, I'm not generally a fan of wartime comparisons, but I think there are parallels between this moment during coronavirus, as we kind of rebuild from the devastation of the pandemic, and in 1945, when the Labour government at the time created the NHS after the Second World War. And what we should have seen from the Chancellor's budget in March was, like we had the National Health Service in 1945, from the 1945 government, we need the creation of a National Care Service. And that was a huge missed opportunity. So yeah, we need to galvanise all of the attention that COVID has focused on the care system and how broken it is, and use that to push the government to make serious changes.
So I'm so surprised. I didn't realise that was a Labour policy, the National Care Service, since 2010. So, and I know that Andy Burnham talked about it when he came on one of our live streams, and I'm thinking, I mean, I wasn't particularly into politics anyway, but I didn't realize. So why do you think that it's taken so long for that particular policy to gather momentum in the Labour Party?
I think it's a number of factors. So the fact that the care sector is so under-unionised means that that's a huge reason. So that's why these SAGE care workers going on strike is such a huge deal, is it's not something that's happened before. And whereas usually I think it's right for workers to be leading these struggles and feeding into policy, and then for policymakers to be supporting workers when they raise disputes and industrial action at work, that isn't something that's been happening in the care sector because of the way that it's structured, the way that it's privatised and fragmented. And I think also it's something that it's never been seen as a headline issue. And that's a real shame, because every single one of us has to use social care services at some point in our lives. You know, if we're fortunate enough to live for a long time, or we know somebody who does, grandparents or parents or neighbours, or of course if you experience mental health conditions or learning disabilities, because people often forget that social care is not just about elderly people.
Yeah.
And I think we need to kind of move away from seeing social care as something that is done to people.
I just want to pick up on the point you made about, because I think there's a bit of learning of how politics, or how you're able to bring to Parliament or lobby yourself on things that really matter, and how policy is made. Because traditionally, I think it's almost presented to us that certain MPs will just try to put forward issues that are important, and that generally we think, we've put them in a position because they have put that on their manifesto. But actually, a lot of the push comes from people in the sector who have interests in a particular issue, and you can basically push for things that you've been pushed for by either your constituents, I suppose, but also generally, if the care sector itself said, this is what we want, and those sectors that are highly unionised, they have those union representatives to say, this is what our membership is calling for, and then politicians act based on that. So it's almost, and this is why I think at Coproduce Care, we try to kind of galvanise these types of debates to try and get people thinking, well, it's not just you or a few others who are thinking this way. There's a whole movement behind it. And we need to get those voices and those opinions to our MPs, because that's the way that they will be pushed to make the change. So that's, it kind of comes full circle as to why then you need to have the unions. It's not necessarily because you particularly have any affinity with unions, but it's just because they bring together a voice which is difficult for you to tangibly get hold of and bring to Parliament. Is that kind of a way of summing it up?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because, you know, the big changes and victories that have been won throughout history have never been brought about by sort of benevolent politicians who want to do something nice for people. They've been hard fought for rights that have been won usually by workers going on strike. Things like the weekend that we couldn't imagine life without was brought about by the trade union movement, which is rank and file workers. That's all unions are, is a body of workers coming together and mobilizing and demanding their rights together. And it's when people do that together that they win.
I just want to bring up, because I put out on LinkedIn that we were going to be talking about whether the sector, that we should have the National Care Service. And Dudley Sayer put this as his thoughts. And he did agree with it, but he said, you know, there should be certain caveats, a structure that means that care workers are valued, pay consistent across the country, training, status, and to be deemed as public sector to access all the benefits that care workers deserve, but also a seat at the table alongside the NHS, rather than being seen as their cousin once removed. So there's quite a lot in there. But do you agree that there's actually, you know, we'll talk about a national care service, but there's lots of bits to it that need to happen? Do you feel like we need to work out what it means before people feel comfortable with it, or do we just generally need to get a movement behind a national care service?
There's definitely a lot of meat that needs to be put on the bones of that, and I think that needs to be done from the grassroots up by people who are experts. And when I say experts, I mean people who access social care and people who work in social care. So I think public ownership doesn't need to be kind of statist and top down. I think it should be the opposite. And like in so many aspects of society and our lives, we need more democracy in social care. And I think we have to kind of, through a national care service, and as part of that, aim to change those hierarchical relationships and power structures that and sort of power imbalances that exist within the sector. I think that needs to happen at all levels of the care system. So people need to be central in decisions about their own care. Care needs to be personalised. But I also think that people who access care need to be involved in decisions about care services and about strategic decision making for the care sector as a whole. And also that they're able to influence care policy through things like, you know, in the same way as you would have residents associations and tenants associations. I think that all of that and kind of every aspect of policy, whether it's housing, social care, education, should be influenced from the bottom up. And that's why I think that the work that Coproduce Care does is so important in pushing for that. And of course, it's really important that care workers who are the absolute experts in social care, but whose expertise is often ignored or underutilised, play a key role in influencing social care policy. Because as I said when we started off this call, the conditions that care workers are forced to work in are not just detrimental to their own well-being, but that also has knock-on effects for the people we care for. So, for example, if social care policy was written by care workers, we never would have had the 15-minute care calls policy, because that's impossible to carry out. And it's, you know, having 15 minutes to do someone's care that should take half an hour or 45 minutes, and then having to leg it to the next person does just not make for a good care environment. So we need a care system that works much better for care workers, and that would be a better care system for those accessing it as well.
Brilliant. I think you're saying all the right things. And I've got on my notes to mention a question around how do we give more power to people accessing social care, and you've kind of covered that as well. Do you find it quite difficult to get your voice in Parliament, in your government, actually, in your party, heard around these issues? Because obviously, you obviously understand the sector. There's a policy there around the National Care Service, and you kind of have heard from people who work in the sector, and really you don't hear it being talked about as much. I don't know whether it's the media not picking this up, but do you find these issues around social care quite difficult to put front and centre within the Labour Party at the moment?
I think this year, with coronavirus taking over every part of our lives, including in Parliament, it's very difficult to get things to cut through. But John Ashworth, our Health and Social Care Shadow Secretary, has been absolutely fantastic on all of these issues. He's consistently been calling for stronger rights for care workers, for increased pay, also for full sick pay, because he's recognised that a big hole in the government's lockdown agenda is the fact that so many people, including care workers who are right at the front line, are not able to self-isolate because they can't afford to. So I think all of the thinking is there, not just on our front bench with John Ashworth and Liz Kendall, but also at the grassroots of our party. So people in the GMB and Unison who are rank and file workers, in UVW, it's happening. We just have to galvanise all of this energy to back a policy.
Absolutely. And I think time is of the essence. And looking through the white paper for the health and care integration, it's quite scary looking at some of the changes, especially around commissioning, some of the powers it would give the Secretary of State to bypass some of the procurement that we have at the moment, rules, and there could be a massive move away from what we're talking about today, and more towards privatisation through the back door, I suppose. Does that, and that's for not just the NHS, but also for social care, does that worry you that within this Parliament so much is going to be put through that it turns into pieces of legislation that then is really hard to wind back on, even if you do have a different party in government in 3 years' time or so?
Yeah, it's like the Health and Social Care Act all over again. I mean, fundamentally, this white paper just doesn't propose the kind of long-term reform and deep structural change that we need urgently. It says that it will set out reforms at some time this year, but the government didn't keep that promise 18 months ago. So I've got little faith that that will happen now. But also it shows that that the government's immediate priority isn't addressing this chronic underfunding, which that is what is bringing the sector to its knees, but is sort of on this vague idea of national oversight of care and support. But it doesn't include any detail as to how these even very limited changes are going to be funded. So it fails to address staff shortages. It fails to address all of those really deep inequalities that COVID has laid bare. So, for example, just one thing, because I know we're running out of time, but this planned introduction of personal care budgets, that increases, it potentially risks increasing the variation in the services that people receive. So could create a sort of postcode lottery. And then that has the potential to exacerbate inequalities that people are already experiencing. I would say, rather than tinkering around the edges of the current system, we need a properly funded, publicly delivered national care service. But I've got no confidence that the Tory government will do that, because, well, they simply just don't believe in public services and state intervention.
That's it. That's their philosophy. So there's no getting around that. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's whizzed past. I feel like we could do another 40 minutes and still not got through half of the stuff that we want to get through. So it's been great having you on, and you really do know that you have joined us this evening, and we've put loads of information about how people can sort of keep track on what you're saying on Twitter and whatnot, so definitely keep an eye on what you're doing. But yes, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Nadia.
Thank you so much for having me. No, it was really great to join your channel, and keep up the amazing work you're doing.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care, Sophie. Bye.
So that was great. That was wonderful, Nadia Whittome. You should keep an eye on what she's doing and how she's getting out there, and how she is really talking about social care and what needs to happen in this space. I think there's a long way to go, but we need more voices like that. And I think it's promising to hear another politician talking like that. So when you think about what you want to change, definitely go to your MP, whichever colour they are, in terms of politically, and just explain to them what you're going through. If you're a care worker, if you're a care manager, and the government is doing something which is making your life really difficult, then you just need to email them, because once it's in their inbox, then their secretaries, they have to respond to it in some way. They should be responding to it in some way. I did the same with my MPs when the guidance around people living in care homes visiting out came out. It's now been changed slightly, still not right, but saying that people need to isolate for 40 days if they went out of their care home, which is absolutely ridiculous. And more people, we all need to be doing more of this, I think, and not just putting up with it. There's ways to get out there and to make sure that your MPs know what's going on with you, because they're not like Nadia, who knows the care sector, who's actually done the job. You'll be so surprised with how little they understand about the sector. So yeah, just a shout out to be doing that. And yeah, please do share this live stream. Please do make sure that you like it, and feel free to watch it again and share bits that Nadia's been saying. We'll be doing just that after this live stream. So just a quick reminder, we've got a couple of things coming up next week. Do just clock on to our website if you want to find out more about what we've been blogging about in the past, and look at the various different live streams that we've done over the whole pandemic. So do keep in touch, and hopefully we will see you back here next week. Take care, everyone.